Hello guys and gals, me Mudahar, and Last of Us Part 1 is not worth $70. Now ladies and gentlemen, as you all know, video games used to cost 60 bucks, okay? You know, unlike gasoline, cars, and groceries, video games rely on a structure where the price cannot fluctuate, okay? When people get their first $60 fix, they want to make sure the next fix is $60. It's just how the economy works for video games. But of course, gaming has gotten more expensive. As we got the PS5, the Xbox Series S and X, and the Nintendo Switch 2, whenever that drops, games have jumped up $10, okay? So now they're all 70 bucks a pop, and if you live in Canada, that's 100 Canadian dollars with taxes, no joke. So Last of Us Part 1 came out, and I'll be real with you, okay? This is not worth $70, okay? So I recently just finished it. Last night I did the final level of the game, and I finished it, and now to start off with, I'm a little bit, conflicted. I think Last of Us 1, great game. And I think if you have never played the game, it is definitely an experience worth jumping into. Now, when I look at The Last of Us Part 1, it's a game that's 9 years old, a late PlayStation 3 game, a modern game, if you will. Don't jump in here and say, oh man, that's my favorite retro game. No, Last of Us 1 is pretty modern. It actually was at the end of the PlayStation's lifespan, the 3. So, PlayStation 3 had Last of Us, PlayStation 4, like a year later, had Last of Us Remastered, okay? And that got updated for like 60 frames per second, running on the PlayStation 4 Pro, 4K, you name it. Now, the Last of Us Last of Us 1 Remastered already looked good. So, when this game was being remade, I kind of wondered why. Now, let's start off with the positives, okay? Because there's really only one. The game looks good, okay? People who are like, I can't see the difference between the original game and the PS5 version. Get your fucking eyes checked, okay? Alright, I'm off my medication. I can still identify the difference. It looks good. Now, does it look jaw-dropping amazing like Returnal or Demon's Souls? No. I would say this game is pretty much matched with Last of Us 2, which looks great, okay? I may not be a fan of the story for Last of Us 2, but I'm a huge sucker for the graphics, the set pieces, and just the overall visual design for that game. And Last of Us Part 1 matches Part 2. It matches it so well that the user interface, the crosshairs, everything is like an identical version. It's so identical that at the end of Last of Us Part 1, I almost thought Last of Us Part 2 would start playing seamlessly, which didn't happen. So for a game that's $70, alright, I have to wonder, okay, what are the negatives? First off, this game might visually look as good, but the level design is the exact same. I swear to God, they've matched the exact, placement of all the enemies. One of the new advancements is the gameplay, which there's not much changes. It's not like they have the dodge mechanic from 2 put into the game, or proning. They said the AI got updated, and I guess it did. I guess they flank you a little bit better. But beyond that, there's nothing really changing this game. I would say this is not so much a remake, more as it is a remaster, okay? Now, when I think of a remake, I think of big projects like Final Fantasy VII Remake Project, right? Where, they are fundamentally re-looking at what made the original game. It's a new chance, right? When you think of a remake, right, versus a remaster, it's the ability, it's the chance at a lot of these game developers to look back at what made their game amazing and actually add things or change the game in a way that reflects the technology they're working with now. I'm sure the team over at Naughty Dog, okay, did not have even close to the resources as the PlayStation 5. I don't know why this game didn't have, any extra levels put into it, any extra design, maybe make the levels a little bit more open. Why it is a one-to-one remake kind of baffles me, okay? When I think of a remake, I really do think of a game that's generally reimagined, all right? Or a game that's expanded upon heavily. When I think of a remaster, yeah, obviously it's the game, touched up a little bit. That's pretty much where I get into. So no, Last of Us Part 1 is no different than the original game. The only differences I've noticed are the workbenches and the cool animations from the second game, which might as well have just been a complete substitute for the first game's upgrade mechanic. And the other big noticeable aspect that I guess I noticed was, yeah, that's pretty much it, actually. There's not much more to it. Now, for $70, they gave you the downloadable content as well with it, Left Behind, which is a pretty decent bit of DLC. This is my first time ever actually doing it, so that's pretty fun. But they completely removed the multiplayer component. Now, one of the things that really baffled me about The Last of Us is the first game had such an interesting, fun multiplayer component where you were just sneaking around, getting pot shots on enemies. That was really, really interesting to me. As somebody that loved Splinter Cell gameplay, like the Splinter Cell Online adversarial modes, I was a huge fan of Last of Us. And the fact that they basically didn't touch upon it in the second game, and they didn't even remaster it or remake it for this one, baffles me too. Now, there's not a lot of PlayStation 5 exclusive games out there. When I think of like actual games that are only on the PlayStation 5, I can think of like two off the top of my head. Three, really. I think of Ratchet and Clank, which might as well have been a PS2 game anyways. I mean, it looks nice, but fundamentally is not too different than what we would have gotten back in the day. Returnal is about the only good PlayStation 5 game that I've genuinely played that looks amazing, plays amazing, and feels absolutely brilliant. Great title. And Demon's Souls, which I've already played a lot on the PlayStation 3. It's not even like that game is fundamentally different on the PlayStation 5 other than looking slightly better. Now, when it comes to these PlayStation games, they're pretty much movie titles, which at this point, they're very linear, single-player games. You're going to jump into it. You're going to get that same movie experience for $60. Not that there's, or $70. Not that there's anything wrong necessarily with that, but there's not a whole lot of room of replayability in titles like this. So for $70, the fact that we've gotten rid of the multiplayer component and the game is slightly better, it's really raised a question, is this game worth $70? And my answer to that is absolutely not. I don't know why Naughty Dog didn't just sit down and realize that, hey, if we're going to charge $70 for a game that is visually identical to the second title, why didn't they just bundle Last of Us Part 1 and 2? I'm really struggling to find the value proposition in this entire deal when if you're going to get people on the Last of Us train, and they're doing this because of the HBO TV series that's coming out, which looks pretty decent, the only reason they're doing this remake is to get people who are going to watch that jumping onto the video game side right after they watch that over on television. So obviously, if you were going to sell people on Last of Us Part 1 for $70, it probably would have been ideal for them to like bundle in Last of Us Part 2 as well, just so you could have like 40 to nearly 50 hours of gameplay for $70 versus an incredibly short PS3 era game. Like I said, there's no changes to the game's like single player at all. It is a very short experience. I mean, when you play Last of Us Part 1, you can literally feel now the limitations of the PlayStation 3. The levels are clearly smaller. The scope of the game is clearly shorter because they were designing it for a system that is over a decade old at this point, well over a decade old. So now that we've got this brand new spanking system, sure, the visuals are updated to Last of Us 2 quality, but the gameplay has not changed. So they're effectively charging you $70 for a better looking PS3 game at this point. And is it much better looking? Yes, it is. Is it far better looking than what we saw in Last of Us Part 2? No. It really feels like this is the B team jumping in to do like a little side project before they're allowed to touch like the big projects at Naughty Dog. Ladies and gentlemen, Last of Us Part 1 is just not worth $70. And to be real with you, going forward into video gaming, these $70 games really need to step their tiers up before gamers should really be expected to pay that much money. $70, is a lot of fucking money. And when you're paying that much money, all right, are we literally excited about replaying PlayStation 3 games that are hardly aged whatsoever? Or are we here to look for newer experiences going on forward? I have to ask that question to you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is me, Mudahar, and if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike if you dislike it. I am out.